Well, here they are. Better late than never. The top 10 jokes of the year. Number 10. My girlfriend and I had been dating for over a year, so we decided to get married. My parents helped us in every way. My friends encouraged me, and my girlfriend, well, she was a dream. There was only one thing bothering me, and that was her younger sister. You see, my sister in law was 20 years old. She wore tight mini skirts and low cut dresses. She would always bend down when near me, and I got many a pleasant view of her. It had to be deliberate. She never did it when anybody else was around. One day, her little sister called me and asked me to come over to check on the wedding invitations. Well, she was alone when I got there, and she whispered to me that soon I was to be married, and she had feelings. She just wanted to be with me one time before I got married. Well, I was in total shock. I couldn't say anything. She said, "Listen, I'm going to go upstairs to my room. If you want to go ahead and come with me, just walk up those stairs." Well, I was stunned and frozen in shock as I watched her walk up the stairs. When she got to the top, she dropped her dress and threw it down the stairs at me, and it landed right at my feet. I stood there for a second, and I turned and walked straight to the front door. Well, I opened that door and I stepped out of the house. I walked straight to my car. My future father-in-law was standing outside. He had tears in his eyes. Well, he hugged me and he said, "We're very happy you passed our little test. We couldn't ask for a better man for our daughter. Welcome to the family." The moral of the story? Always keep your condoms in the car. Number 9. Little Johnny was in class and they were having a discussion about reproduction. The teacher said to the class, "All right, kids, I want you to go home and think about all the different positions that people can use for reproduction." So they all went home for the day, and little Johnny thought real hard. Well, the next day the teacher called on him. "Okay, Johnny, how many positions did you come up with?" Little Johnny said proudly, 73. "Whoa," said the teacher, a little embarrassed. She didn't even know that many positions. "All right, well, very good, Johnny. Okay, who's next? Becky, how about you?" "Gee, Teach, I only came up with one, where the guy just lays on top of the lady." Well, from the back of the room, Johnny shouts, "Whoop! 74. Number 8. There was a girl who everyone made fun of because of her lisp. It was made worse by her name of Susie. All the kids in the neighborhood called her Little Susie. Well, her older sister was very popular, especially with the boys in the neighborhood. Susie, not so much. But as time went on, Susie grew up, and by her senior year, she filled out into one of the hottest girls in school. All the boys would watch in awe as she walked down the hall, but she rarely spoke, pretty embarrassed of her lisp. One day, Susie had to go in for her physical to play sports for the year, and she was in the doc's office, and he finally walked in. "Hello, I'm Doc Brown, and what's your name?" "With Susie." "Okay, well, let's get started." As he placed his stethoscope, "All right, big breaths now." Susie said, "I know. Sometimes they stretch out my sweater, but you should see my sisters." Number 7. The Lone Ranger and his trusty sidekick Tonto were enjoying a quiet drink in the saloon one afternoon when a guy bursts through the swinging doors. "Which one of you guys has that white horse outside?" the guy says. "Well, I do," says the Lone Ranger. "Why do you ask, hombre?" "Well, the horse has collapsed. I think it might be dead." So the three guys rush outside to see that Silver is indeed lying in the middle of Main Street. Lone Ranger drips some water onto the horse's mouth, and Silver perks up a little bit. "It's just heat exhaustion," the Lone Ranger says. "Tonto, how about this? You run around in circles around Silver for a while. I think the breeze will help to get him back on his feet." So Tonto starts running around the horse, and the Lone Ranger goes back into the saloon to finish his drink. But just a few minutes later, another guy comes bursting through the swinging doors. "Who owns that white horse outside?" the guy says. "Ah, damn it," says the Lone Ranger. "What's wrong now?" "Nothing, partner. It's just you, left your engine running." Number 6. There was a rich young lady who decided one day she was fed up with all the men she'd ever been with. None of 'em had ever left her happy. So she decided that she wanted to be with a man who had never been with anybody before their entire life. So she called up all of her employees and told 'em to find her a man who'd never been with a woman. Well, money was no object, so her staff searched the planet, finally locating a young man from the Australian outback. Well, they flew him back to her, and the young guy was bathed and scrubbed before being allowed into her room. But when he walked in, he ignored the beautiful young woman laying on the bed. Instead, he grabbed a hold of the dresser and pushed it out into the hallway. Then he started rolling up the rug and tore down the curtains. "What are you doing?" the woman said. Guy says, "Yeah, it's true. I've never been with a woman before. But if it's anything like a kangaroo, we're gonna need all the room we can get." Number 5. Two ducks had been dating for a little while and finally found a weekend to get away. Well, they walked into the hotel and checked in, but were super anxious to get up to the room and start their romantic weekend filled with all kinds of bedroom fun. Well, once they got to the room, the male duck realizes he forgot his condoms. "It's okay," says the lady duck. "Just call down to room service and have 'em bring some up to the room." Well, a few minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and the male duck waddles over and answers. The bellhop hands the duck the pack of condoms and says, "Here you are, sir. Should I put those on your bill?" "God, no. What do you think I am, some kind of pervert?" Number 4. Little Johnny and his girlfriend Jenny were quite young, but they knew that they were in love. One day they decided that they wanted to get married. So little Johnny goes to Jenny's dad to ask him for her hand in marriage. Well, Johnny bravely walks up to him and says, "Mr. Smith, me and Jenny are in love, and I want to ask you for her hand in marriage." Well, thinking that it was the cutest thing, Mr. Smith said, "Well, Johnny, you're just a young lad. Where will the two of you live?" Well, without even taking a moment to think about it, Johnny says, "Well, we'll live in Jenny's room. It's much bigger than mine. We can both fit in there pretty nicely." Well, still thinking that it was pretty adorable, Mr. Smith says, "Okay then. Well, how will you live? You're not old enough to get a job. You need to support Jenny." Well, again, Johnny says, "Well, our allowance. Jenny makes $5 a week, and I make $10 a week. That's about $60 a month. That should do us just fine." Well, by this time, Mr. Smith was a little shocked that Johnny had put so much thought into it, so he thinks for a moment, trying to come up with something that Johnny won't have an answer to. Well, after a second, Mr. Smith says, "Well, Johnny, seems like you got everything all figured out. I have just one more question for you. What will you do if the two of you should have a little one of your own?" Little Johnny shrugs his shoulders and says, "Well, we've been lucky so far." Number 3. There was a married guy who goes into a confessional at church and says to the priest, "I had an affair with a woman. Almost." The priest says, "What do you mean, almost?" Man says, "Well, we got together and we rubbed together, but then I stopped. And the priest says, rubbing together is the same as going at it. You can't see that woman again. For your penance, you gotta say 5 Hail Marys and put $50 in the poor box. Well, the man leaves the confessional and says his prayers. He walks over to the poor box and pauses for a moment, then starts to leave. The priest, who was watching him the whole time, quickly runs over to him and says, I saw that. You didn't put any money in the poor box. The man says, yeah, but I rubbed $50 on the box, and apparently that's the same as putting it in. Number 2. There was an old cowboy, all dressed up with his cowboy shirt, hat, jeans, spurs, and chaps. He walks into a bar and orders a drink. He sat down sipping his whiskey, and a young lady sat down next to him. Well, after she ordered her drink, she turned to the cowboy and said, Are you a real cowboy? He said, Well, I spent my whole life on a ranch herding cows, breaking horses, mending fences. I guess I am a real cowboy, he said. After a little while, he said, Well, what about you? What are you? Well, she says, Well, I've never been on a ranch, so I'm not a cowboy, said the young woman. But I am a lesbian. I spend my whole day thinking about women. As soon as I get up in the morning, I think of women. When I eat, shower, watch TV, everything seems to make me think of women. A little while later, she left, and Cowboy ordered himself another drink. A couple sat down next to him and said, Are you a real cowboy? The man said, Well, I thought I was, but I just found out I'm a lesbian. Number 1. Our buddy Dave went walking into his local pub and saw his buddy Jeff sitting there, but Jeff was looking all depressed. He says, Hey, what's wrong, buddy? Well, Jeff says, You know that beautiful girl at work, the one that gets me all excited every time I see her and I gotta hide? Yeah, said Dave with a smile. Well, Jeff says, I finally got up the courage to ask her out, and she actually agreed. Well, that's great, said Dave. When are you going out? Well, that's the thing. I want to meet her tonight, and I was worried about getting too excited, if you know what I mean. So I got some duct tape, and, well, I taped my junk right to my leg so it wouldn't show when I saw her. But when I got to her house, she was wearing the tiniest little dress you ever saw. Yeah? Well, then what happened? Said Dave. Accidentally kicked her in the face. Well, what'd you think? Did you like 'em? Did you hate 'em? Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks.